At the end of the day, I went out of my comfort zone. So every once in a while, I do things that put me out of my comfort zone. It's great. It extends your range. If it goes wrong, I knew it because it's a conscious thing. SpaceX changed me a lot. I had flaws before that I probably lost along the way, but then I probably added new flaws along the way. But SpaceX definitely is a lesson in terms of humbleness and put your company's goal in front of your own to some extent.
Hello and welcome to the Leadership Launchpad, where we help managers improve themselves, their teams, and their organizations by providing real-world advice from leaders who have been through the struggle of leading and scaling highly technical teams. Today's episode is an exciting one because I got to chat with none other than Hans Koenigsmann, former VP of Build and Flight Reliability at SpaceX. For those who don't know, Hans was employee number 4 at SpaceX in 2002, and he stayed with the company all the way until 2021. During this time there, he held a lot of roles, including the head of avionics for early Falcon 1 missions, chief launch engineer, and leading the investigation of critical failures such as CRS-7 and AMOS-6. In this discussion, we touch on a number of items such as what it is like to bring together a team that has never worked together before, as is the case with a failure investigation, and how he personally had to scale his leadership from working in a company of 4 people to working in a company with over 14,000. Before we get into the discussion, I do want to remind you that this is your first time listening to the show. Make sure you subscribe so you never miss a future episode. And if you are already subscribed, first, thank you. And second, if you get anything out of this conversation, I ask that you humbly share it with at least one other person, because that, after all, is how we grow. I can't tell you how much it means to me. So with that, let's get into the discussion with Hans Koenigsmann. Hans, thank you so much for being here today. I can't tell you how excited I am for this conversation. It is one interesting thing that when I talk to other people about my memories of SpaceX, this idea of trying to automate your job away, get rid of your job, is something that people find uniquely interesting and unexpected. It's something that seems very different than most companies. Is that your experience?
I think there's also this constant thing about change, right? And the thing was very dynamic. I think the other jobs are dynamic too, but it was extreme on SpaceX side. There's no question about it. We saw more change, which on the flip side also kept it interesting for many years. Yeah. So in that sense, I didn't feel like I'm stuck somewhere and doing the same thing all the time, but I'd rather thought, well, this is new today. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's on that note, I think one of the other questions I had that I think is really interesting, because the company was constantly changing. I mean, the company has grown so much now from the time you were literally employee 4. By the time you left, the company was probably north of 10,000 people.
Yeah, we were 15,000 or 14,000 by the time I left.
Yeah, and that's a lot of change. How did you personally keep up with that in terms of not many? It's really rare for early leaders at a company to be able to grow their own leadership ability through that much growth.
And to be fair, also not very many survived in that sense. When you look at it, it did change. Maybe on the VP side, maybe half of them, maybe not even that. But very few actually survived really and thrived over a long time. I struggled with it too in the middle, basically. Partly because my job description changed. Partly also because I was the generalist. I always say I was good with duct tape and zip ties to make it work. But that after a while, we just needed people that can do really good layout. And so I recognized that at one point and changed direction, worked more with the system on the system level, and did find a spot where I think I was useful, and could actually apply myself.
Yeah.
As my background is pretty broad. I know propulsion, I know structures, I know electronic, obviously, and I know software, I know flight dynamics and all these things. And putting it all together basically made me a good person for what we call the launch chief engineer. And then I ventured into reliability and all these things. And that kind of was a really good, a good solution for me, rather than trying to lead avionics and electronics, where I'm just not good at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for me, part of it was because I was dynamic enough to do other things.
Yeah.
Part of it was also I knew the people really well, and I could talk to them. I could talk to Gwyn and say, look, I mean, I don't think this works for me. Why don't we do this over here? Yeah, and Gwyn also tried to find a place for me because she knew me. And so I think it must have been a unique combination at the end of the day of what my background is and how my personality works out. Because I also ventured into other things. I did the press conferences.
Yeah.
And that was completely off topic of whatever I do otherwise, right? And I did this partly to protect people from getting fired. This was a really dangerous thing to do, right? But
Yeah.
and I thought, okay, I'm kind of like set where I am, and so if I get fired over that, then I think that's fine. If other
Yeah.
people get fired over that, I wouldn't want to see that. And I've seen this actually before, that people said the wrong thing and it had consequences. And so I felt like I want to try this, and it turns out that actually people liked it, and I later found out this is primarily because of my German accent.
Sure.
And so I was a little bit like bummer that it's just the accent. Basically, what I consider a flaw is what people liked.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think in general, it makes you feel more human when you have when those flaws are there to be seen,
Well,
I think.
it also makes you feel more engineering, I think, in this particular case.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Excellent. So you initially did it because of, to kind of protect people because you felt okay. Like any other lessons that you drew from that kind of side quest?
Yeah. Actually, I've tried to continue this because at the end of the day, I went out of my comfort zone, right?
Yes.
And so every once in a while, I do things that put me out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And actually, it's great. It gives you, it extends your range. If it goes wrong, I knew it because it's like a conscious thing. I want to try this, and if it goes wrong, then I don't do it again. But if it works out, then who knows, right?
Yeah.
And so it turned out it worked out, and I've done a lot of that. After that, I've done parts. I've taken part in the Netflix about the human spaceflight. Return to Space is the title. And so I did a lot of things that were basically not engineering, and they were publicity related. And over time, I became comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Actually, that means I shouldn't do it, right? But it made me better in another area where I would not have expected to have any significant talents before.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, oh, this is a new thing. I can do this. And it is also, to some extent, part of leadership, to look at the situation and be able to summarize it in a way that other people, that you make it easy to understand for other people. And that helped me doing that. So a lot of stuff that I learned by doing that.
That's actually a really good point. They are really similar, and that is such a key piece of leadership. Are there any other? I'd be interested to know, since you are one of the few who kind of survived all that growth, and there was a lot of change in your role, and you were doing these other side quests to try new things. But what about specifically kind of about growing yourself as a leader? When you think about your time there, do you think of specific lessons that you had to learn or things you had to push through?
Let's see. I don't think so. We had some leadership training too, right? And I thought I could not really work with that easily. It didn't help me a lot. And in particular, HR has a way to train people that I thought is very bland,
Yeah.
very like textbook wise, and you can change that. You can put your style on this, and I
Yes.
did put my style on it, and in most cases, I think that was a good thing. It's I learned a lot. I mean, SpaceX changed me a lot,
Yeah.
and I had flaws before that I probably lost along the way, but I probably added new flaws along the way. But SpaceX definitely was is a lesson in terms of humbleness and yeah and and not and put your company's goal in front of your own to some
Yeah.
extent.
Yeah.
And to some extent means basically you don't have to overstay overnight. I mean, there's all this talk about like long hours and everything. That's not what I remember from SpaceX as being the most important thing. Yeah, the
Yeah.
most important thing was like you have to think as a company what is good for the company, primarily, and not necessarily what's good for my department or what's good
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
And that was a really important thing. And then obviously, if you had like whatever a home emergency or something, then we deal with that too, right? I was one of the things that really I started. I tried to work really hard is when people got kids. I try to assure them you have the time for your kids. You got to take the time, yeah.
Yeah.
And the choice is mostly yours.
Yeah.
You got to tell me obviously when you leave and things like that. We can work that out. But people made assumptions there that, oh, you can't do that, and then tried to leave the company or left the company in some cases. And I was really disappointed because I myself had a 6-year-old when we started SpaceX, and so I juggled with that, and
Yeah.
it was, I think I could have done better in some cases, but at the same time, she also learned about SpaceX too.
Yeah.
And so she became who she is now, partly because I worked at SpaceX and she, stayed with me at the company, or, she visited me and those things. And so it's definitely an experience for the family. Um, and you just got, yeah, you
Yeah. It's
just
just,
got to embrace that.
yeah, exactly. And it's all, everything's a trade. They're all trade-offs. And it's just,
Yeah,
but I think that sounds right. It is about, yeah, just, it's less about just pure hour. If anything, like it shouldn't ever be about pure hours. It's just like, what are
no,
you accomplishing with those
right,
hours?
exactly.
Is
But
ultimately what
SpaceX
it's,
was like the way it was set up. You never accomplished what you wanted to accomplish.
yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you were always, by the end of the day, you were slightly more behind than at the beginning of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I always thought that was the greatest thing from my perspective, always seen kind of that the back and forth between, or the different roles of Elon versus Gwen, and just thinking
yeah,
how it's like, it was like Elon's job is to flip the table over, and then
right,
Gwen's job is to put it back together. But then the moment it gets put together, like the point is Elon just comes in and flips it over again.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wanted to shift a little bit to talking where you spent a lot of your time in build and flight reliability, talking about risk. I remember, I forget what the context of this was, but I remember once hearing you say, I think the phrase was "never take risk alone." And if I'm remember that correctly, I'd love to
Yeah,
kind of hear you expand on that. And then just generally, how do you, since you work with so many companies now, how do
yeah,
you get them thinking about risk in terms of risk versus moving forward fast enough, and how you keep,
right.
you
I
know,
mean, risk is a very personal thing, right? It's a personal perception of how bad things are when this happens or when something happens. So first, you need to be creative and actually get to this place where, oh, this can happen. Yeah, I've designed it, and I don't know. I know the flaws. This might break here or there, and then what happens, right?
yeah,
And so it's partly creative actually to figure out what can break on your system. And then the other thing is you evaluate this and say, oh, it's probably low risk because it doesn't happen, or if that happens, then this happens. So you actually want to run it by a second person or more people to just look at, is your assessment actually correct? Yeah.
yeah,
Is that particular risk you get because you get used to it? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, Trying to find examples of like, let's say your car has like one brake that, pulls to the left, and you kind of get used to it, right?
yeah,
And so over time you normalize yourself. And but if you were to actually discuss, and nobody noticed that because you compensate for that and it's easier.
yes,
The day when you really need the brakes and you just slam it, that's the day when, for the first time, you will go on the wrong side. Yeah. Um, and and so if you would have run this by somebody, that somebody might have said, I think in normal life it's probably fine, but if you really slam it, is it the same or is it worse? Yeah. Can you
Yeah.
compensate then too? And so I feel like the discussion around this, or the diversity has become a dirty word, but I think there is some utility on diversity here because people perceive risk in different ways. Yeah, and
Yes.
that's why we also assemble teams that are people from different backgrounds, or like in the anomaly investigations, we try to pick people from totally different disciplines,
Yeah.
and also different backgrounds, is helpful because every once in a while somebody says things and I go, well, I haven't really thought about this actually. Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you have a team.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said, I love how you said that risk is a personal thing. And I do think, because when you look at almost, any forward movement, any change, it all involves
Right.
some form of risk.
Yeah.
And I think, I know you've worked, or maybe you still work with Astroforge, and I've listened to um, interviews with Matt talk about how, when
Yeah.
they're thinking about risk at their company, it's like, it seems like they are very forward leaning, at least from
Yeah.
what I've heard in terms of how much
Yeah.
risk is
Yeah.
acceptable. When you're talking with folks, how do you help an organization calibrate their appetite for risk?
Well, okay. I think there's consequences when you take a risk and it fails a couple times, right?
Yeah.
And so they're also at the point where things have to work now, and
Mhm.
for every company comes the time where things have to work.
Yes.
This is probably true for Starship too.
Yes. Yes.
And so and somebody needs to spell it out, I think, to some extent, because otherwise you in this mode, you're working every day, but you don't really think about what that means going forward. And so I am happy to spell that out, and tell them there will be consequences.
Yeah.
And it's part of the risk taking. I mean, you know this obviously, but if you take a conscious risk, there will be consequences, and you should know the consequences. And then you make the assessment and say, okay, it's a medium risk, or maybe it's a low risk and I can do this, or it's a medium risk and I shouldn't probably do that.
Yeah.
I do this not every time, but almost every time I fly. I'm a pilot, and so I look at the weather and go, okay, this looks like a low risk and I can always turn around. I have enough fuel. I think I
Yeah.
go. Or I look
Yeah.
at this and go, I think it looks bad at the arrival airport. And let's not do it today.
Yeah. How much of that do you think can be learned through learning from the experience of other people versus lessons that just have to be learned yourself?
So I think you can learn a big part by lessons that others have. You have to expose yourself a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. You have to do things that are, well, I don't want to say everybody should do risky things. Yeah. But you have to do some things to get yourself a little bit exposed in the game, right?
Yes.
For me, it's flying, skiing, diving. So
Okay.
I do things, and then sometimes I'm not in my comfort zone. Maybe it's the comfort zone thing too. Maybe you should
Yes.
just do things that are not in your comfort zone,
Yeah.
to get used to that. Yeah, but then you can learn a lot by reading reports. I love the NTSB database, National
Yeah.
Transportation Safety Board.
It's incredible.
They have great stuff. I mean, some of the stuff is hilarious, and others is pretty sad. I'm interested in reports of stuff that are new, or almost like not that hasn't happened before. Like there was an Air France A340 that disappeared over the Atlantic, and it took a while to figure that out. And that's like it's a crazy thing. That report, and it's just a dry accident report, and you read through things. It's like for me at least, it's super interesting what happened there. So, anyways, you have to have an interest in that and read a little bit, and that helps you learning. There's a couple of good books, I think, too. Although on the books, I feel like they get dry and boring after a while. So I got to have multiple books and just read the first chapters.
Well, I think the biggest takeaway that I have from what you just said that I really love is that importance of taking your own risk with learning about other
Yeah.
people's risks. And it really stems from, like, there's lots of research around when you're trying to learn like using visualization to learn. And there's been studies where it's like they take a group of people who, this group of people practice shooting free throws, and this group of people thinks about shooting free throws, and then the control group doesn't do anything. And the group that thought about shooting free throws improves almost as much as the group that actually shot them.
Okay.
The thing that gets missed in all of that research is that you have to know how to shoot free throws first. Like you have to have some sense of muscle memory for visualization to be able to do anything. And so I'm a pilot too. And so when I read NTSB reports, because I've flown, I can put myself in those situations and really
need to understand
feel
what you're looking at, basically. I see
exactly.
What you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say you can watch 3 Solo.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You can watch it and it's not going to do anything to you. But if you are somebody who's a climber at that level, like it can do something for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting. I really like that. Awesome. Well, I know we're pressed for time, so I did want to finish with one quick question for you of given the timing, because there was a previous interview I listened to you with where you're talking about how let's forget Starship exists for a second and just focus on Falcon 9. I think actually as we're talking, Falcon 9 or SpaceX just kind of raised their launch prices a little bit to keep up with inflation. The hope was, right, like the goal is to drive down launch costs. SpaceX has done amazing things with Falcon 9, but there's still yet no reason for them to decrease launch costs because they're really the only ones doing it. And there's a lot of competitors theoretically coming into the market over the next 18 months or so. What do you see? I know based on what you're seeing in the market, do you have any sense of kind of what might happen to launch costs, assuming New Glenn really starts flying, Terran-R comes up, Stoke starts working? Like, where do you see that going?
So it's interesting because, I mean, obviously, there's many people that copy straight out SpaceX to some extent. And whether they intended to do this or not doesn't really matter. But if you have it's easy to, or relatively easy to have a first stage reusable, second stage, harder fairing, we don't do that. SpaceX on the other side, it does it. So anyways, it's there's a few people that copy it basically. If you remember from the first landing, it was in 2015. It's 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Not quite. I think it's like 10 years and a couple of months. And it took us basically, I want to say the 6-7 years to get to the space, get to the time and spot where they are now. And then also they have the repetitive launches helps a lot, or doing it more often helps a lot. So I see basically a race where one competitor has so much ahead that it's not totally clear how many overturns they did. And the others are kind of doing the same thing, way behind, and have to work things out. That took us, for SpaceX, years to figure that out. Yeah. So it's not a fair race. And going back to your original, what you said, raise the launch cost. I mean, it's pretty clear that not the first but the second reusable rocket lowers the cost. Yeah. I mean, I'm personally working with Stoke a lot. Yeah. And it's partly because it's the only company that I saw doing the second stage first.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is the hard part. And unfortunately, this is a business where you have to do the hard part first, or your success will be not so great.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see them. I feel like they're the first true post reusability launch company. Right. Because when they started, it was like, oh, okay, reusability is a thing rather than reusability becoming a thing.
Right. And also they have a heat shield design that's using fuel. I mean, it uses it. And so it's not ablative versus all the other heat shields are to some extent ablative, even if they're not really.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see how that works.
No worries. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening in on the conversation. I hope you got as much out of it as I did. If you are a manager yourself and you're looking for more insight onto how to better lead your team, please make sure to check out some of our other amazing episodes. If you are responsible for developing leaders in your organization and you're struggling to make programs that actually change behavior and actually impact the business, please reach out so we can figure out how to make your organization better every day. Drop me a line using matt@bettereverydaystudios.com. I look forward to the conversation.